Chapter 2 Whispers in the Mist. Baku was still. An uncertain calm had descended upon its forests. No breeze blew along the treetops. Nothing stirred on the forest floor. Only the heavy mist sailed through the air and curled around the flowering shrubs. Then there was a gentle rustling of something crawling through the grass. Here the foliage would stir, and there it would rustle again. From under the foliage, a baby snake emerged into the fog and cold of the night, all alone under the shadows of the trees. The little one felt lost, uncertain of where he was going, or where he was supposed to go in this big new world. As he slid softly along the moist forest floor, his small eyes looked up with babyish curiosity at the dark, towering trees. He thought the trees might know he was there, and he felt as if they were all looking down on him as he passed. He turned his eyes forward once more and wandered deeper into the forest's beauty, mystery, and uncertainty. He kept watchful for any shapes that might move in the shadows. His weak ears were wary for any sudden sounds, and he felt for any sonic vibrations with his body. Several times he raised himself upright and flicked his tongue, absorbing the many fragrances in the misty air, learning about his environment. A strange cold rush phased through him. He stopped and raised his head higher in alarm. His sapphire eyes peered across the forest floor. He sensed that something could see him, but he couldn't see that something, nor taste its scent. And then a word was spoken to him. Follow. Peering around in the darkness, the infant watched as the mists in front of him began to stir about. They moved in swirls and shapes, taking the form of a ghostly creature. The mists leaned up and seemed to look at him. This way. The infant lowered his head and slithered in pursuit of the misty being. The being glided deeper into the shadows of the forest. This way. Follow. Moving deeper into the forest, the infant snake chased after his guide. Along the way, he saw many new curious sights. Once he was distracted by a beautiful, elaborate spider's web, glistening in the morning dew. He stopped just for a moment, and then curiously began to approach it for a better look. Come. The little one glanced back to where the being was going and followed, sensing urgency. They came to a place where the mists faded, and with them, the image of the infant snake's guide. Nevertheless, as though by some extra sense, the baby could tell the being was still there. Rest. Weary and needing to catch his breath, the infant did as he was told. He did not have long to recover, however. The beating of wings came from overhead in the trees. The baby felt the slightest vibrations in the earth, and he glanced about his surroundings warily. A raven was perched on a high tree branch close by. The bird turned its head to the far left, then to the far right, and it was clear to the baby snake that it was looking for something. The infant felt a gentle breeze pick up, pulling him deeper into the forest. He turned his head in the direction of the wind, and he could feel the presence of the being gliding through the air, beckoning him to hurry. The infant peered back at the treetops, his sapphire eyes shining in the starlight. The raven turned its bright red eyes in many directions, appearing ill at ease. When the bird's gaze came in the baby's direction, it stood still. It narrowed its eyes, and then moved its head closer to the ground toward him. Under the raven's gaze, the infant felt a shadowy feeling looming heavily down on him. Come, said the invisible being. Hurry away. The infant snake looked forward again and sprinted after his invisible guide. His instincts told him that if that strange bird got a good enough look at him, something horrible would happen. The baby snake followed the invisible being to a mistier part of the forest, and then looked back to see the raven had vanished. The infant snake also wished he had something to eat. He was feeling weak, and his newborn stomach was hungry for its first meal. Another cold rush phased through him, unusually swiftly, making him shrink up. He darted his eyes in the direction of the cold rush and felt the presence of his guide racing swiftly across the forest floor. A short moment later, he watched as a very large, beautiful tree lit up with a gentle blue glow. "Come this way." The infant followed, sliding to the foot of the tree, and then up its slanted trunk, gripping the bark with the curves of his body until he had made his way into the canopy. The canopy was a world of limbs and branches and leaves all on its own to the little infant, aglow with a peaceful blue light, which he understood was made by the invisible being. "Here." The infant took another look around and noticed small round fruits were hanging from the branches, colored in shades of lively green, bright yellow, creamy orange, and patches of red. All looked very good to eat. Then he glanced up to see one of the largest, brightest, and ripest of the fruits in the tree. He crept through the branches to where it hung and examined it for a moment, darting his tongue around it. "Eat." The baby moved his head closer, opened his mouth full of tiny, gripping teeth, and bit into the soft flesh of the fruit. Tender, furry skin and sweet juice trickled down his jaws. He ate eagerly, absorbing energy and strength. When he was moderately satisfied, he felt the rush of cold again. "Follow quickly." The infant followed the being's presence with his eyes, and then felt another gaze at his back. He turned and was shocked to see the raven again, standing on a neighboring tree, peering through the branches at him. "Hurry away. Hurry away." After another quick glance at the raven's burning stare, the baby followed after the ghost, racing out of the tree and back to the forest floor. The infant was taken into a deeper part of the forest yet. He felt the presence of his guide leading him over the hills and gullies. He looked back often. The raven was always watching him, flying from tree to tree in pursuit. Finally, the baby followed the being to the edge of a deep cleft in the forest floor. He felt the ghostly presence float directly over the ravine and stop. "Sleep, sleep." The baby looked up to see the raven land on the closest tree and stare down with that same frightening curiosity. Confused, the baby turned back to his invisible guide, wanting direction. "Sleep, sleep down in the dark." The infant peered into the foreboding darkness of the cleft below. He did not like the way it looked. There was too much he did not know about it. But then a soft breeze picked up, pulling him deeper into the darkness of the cleft, brushing the plants and foliage around its entrance. The infant took one last look at the raven standing above him and finally made up his mind. As soon as he retreated into the darkness, the raven seemed to become alarmed and flapped down to the ground. The infant slithered deeper into the wall of the ravine, glancing up to see the bird appear at the edge. It shifted its eyes to the right and then to the left yet again, as if it could no longer see him. Finally, the raven stepped away from the cleft, took wing, and vanished. An uncanny peace descended into the ravine. The baby knew that he was safe at last. The floor felt cool underneath him and was made of a luxurious, rich soil. His new sanctuary was bountiful with green foliage of bright, healthy plants, giving off a soothing fragrance. On the far side was a large puddle of clear, beautifully scented water. The infant could see the gleaming eyes of a family of newts peering at him in curiosity. He also sensed a few small fish swimming in the puddle. He heard the sound of insects chirping soothingly. "Safe, safe, safe." The infant could detect his guide floating somewhere in the shadows of the cleft. The breeze blew over his skin, gentle and soothing. "Sleep," whispered the spirit. Strange blue glows appeared and disappeared in different places in the cleft, and before long, the infant felt an unearthly sleepiness overcome him. His sapphire eyes dimmed wearily. He lifted his head and yawned, showing his teeth, and curled up in a comfortable corner on the soft floor. A bright azure glow lit up and floated directly above him. The infant looked up and saw his invisible guide in form. He was standing in the air, gazing down and wrapping his long, shadowy wings around him in guardianship. The infant's sleepy eyes showed awe and admiration. Sensing everything was right at last, he fell into a deep, tranquil sleep. And when he awoke again later that night, the being was still there.